For years, one of the most controversial and polarizing figures in modern American politics, Congresswoman Ilhan Omar has been surrounded by rumors, claims, and conflicting reports that have blurred the lines between truth, speculation, and political warfare. The most persistent and sensational of these claims alleges that she once entered into a marriage with a close relative, specifically her brother, to help him gain legal status in the United States. The story first surfaced on fringe blogs and social media more than a decade ago, but over time it was amplified through partisan echo chambers, political talk shows, and online forums until it became one of the most widely discussed and enduring narratives about a sitting member of Congress. What began as an unverified online rumor soon turned into a recurring talking point among commentators, influencers, and politicians eager to challenge her credibility. At first, many dismissed the allegations as politically motivated attacks, pointing out that no verifiable evidence had ever surfaced to confirm such an extraordinary claim. However, as the rumor grew louder and reached the mainstream, even former President Donald Trump publicly acknowledged having heard about it, saying during a press briefing that while he did not know the details, he believed someone should look into it. That brief comment, made in passing, helped propel the story from obscure internet speculation into national political conversation. From that moment, Omar's personal life became the centerpiece of a much larger debate about integrity, immigration policy, and fairness in law enforcement. Critics seized on the story as evidence of a broken system that favors the powerful, while her supporters argued it was a calculated smear campaign designed to discredit a progressive Muslim woman in office. As time went on, the situation grew even more complex when federal agencies began discussing broad efforts to combat immigration fraud nationwide. In late 2025, the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services announced a sweeping initiative known as Operation Twin Shield, a large-scale enforcement campaign focused on exposing fraudulent marriages, visa scams, and falsified immigration documents in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area. The agency's director, Joseph Edlow, held a major press conference alongside representatives from Immigration and Customs Enforcement, the FBI, and the DEA, announcing that the operation had uncovered widespread patterns of deceit within the system. Over the course of several months, agents conducted more than 1,000 site visits and reviewed roughly 900 individual cases. They discovered a web of fraudulent documents, arranged marriages, visa overstays, and organized networks operating to exploit legal loopholes. In one example, investigators found a man who allegedly purchased a fake death certificate in Kenya to hide an existing marriage. In another, a suspect linked to a terrorism watch list was discovered to have used falsified paperwork to stay in the United States. Officials emphasized that these were not victimless crimes. They undermined national security, compromised the immigration process, and eroded public trust in government systems. While none of the official reports mentioned Omar or any elected official by name, the fact that her district lies in the same region where Operation Twin Shield took place quickly reignited old controversies. Political commentators and social media influencers began drawing speculative connections between the investigation and Omar's past, suggesting that the timing of the operation might not be coincidental. Despite repeated clarifications from government representatives stating that there was no evidence or case linking Omar to the operation, online speculation intensified, spreading across platforms like wildfire and once again pushing her into the eye of a political storm. In reality, the verified facts paint a far less dramatic picture than the viral headlines. Multiple mainstream outlets, including Reuters, the Associated Press, and the Minneapolis Star-Tribune, have independently examined court records, immigration filings, and other official documents, concluding that there is no verified evidence that Ilhan Omar committed immigration fraud or entered into any illegal marriage. Similarly, the separate and highly publicized $200 million nonprofit scandal in Minnesota, which involved the misuse of federal funds by several organizations, did not directly involve Omar in any capacity. While it is true that some individuals later implicated in the scandal had once donated to her campaign, Omar returned those contributions and publicly condemned the fraud as soon as the connection became known. Nevertheless, on social media, the distinction between fact and rumor was quickly lost. Many online creators merged unrelated stories, Operation Twin Shield, the nonprofit scandal, and old marriage rumors, into a single narrative designed for maximum outrage and viral impact. Within hours of the USCIS press briefing, hashtags calling for Omar's resignation began trending across multiple platforms, soon followed by counter-campaigns defending her and denouncing what supporters described as a coordinated smear effort. The rapid spread of information, combined with the emotional charge of partisan politics, created a cycle where speculation became accepted as fact long before verification could catch up. Inside Washington, the fallout was immediate and deeply divided. Several conservative lawmakers demanded that Congress obtain and release the full findings of Operation Twin Shield, arguing that the American public had a right to transparency in matters of national security and immigration enforcement. They insisted that such a review was not about targeting Omar personally, but about ensuring that all citizens, regardless of political position, were held to the same legal standard. Democrats and progressive allies of Omar, however, viewed those calls as thinly veiled political theater, an attempt to weaponize immigration issues to damage a vocal critic of U.S. foreign policy and a rising star in the progressive movement. Omar herself has repeatedly denied the marriage allegations, calling them baseless, racist, and Islamophobic. She has emphasized that independent journalists have reviewed the evidence and found no credible proof, framing the controversy as part of a broader pattern in which women of color are disproportionately targeted by misinformation campaigns. To her supporters, the endurance of these claims says less about her and more about a system eager to vilify outspoken women who challenge the political establishment. Her critics, on the other hand, argue that unanswered questions and a lack of transparency from federal agencies only fuel public suspicion. Beyond the political drama, Operation Twin Shield remains a significant milestone in U.S. immigration enforcement. The operation's data exposed systemic flaws in the visa system, revealing how organized groups and individuals could manipulate humanitarian and employment programs for personal gain. Federal officials have pledged to use those findings to strengthen verification systems, cross-agency cooperation, and fraud detection technology. Legal analysts have suggested that Twin Shield could become a landmark case in shaping future immigration policy. Yet, despite the government's insistence that the operation is about national security rather than politics, the timing of its announcement, so close to an election cycle, raised inevitable questions about political motivation. The overlap between the operation's location and Omar's district became a convenient coincidence for commentators eager to revive an old scandal. Once again, the conversation around Omar's personal life overshadowed the broader and more urgent issue of how the U.S. immigration system handles fraud and accountability. For many Americans observing the controversy, the case has become emblematic of the larger struggle between fact-based journalism and viral misinformation. In an age where social media posts can reach millions before any official investigation concludes, narratives often form long before truth emerges. Right-leaning outlets tend to frame Omar as a symbol of progressive corruption, while left-leaning publications depict her as a target of relentless disinformation. In this climate, nuance rarely survives. Independent reporters and civic organizations have since called for the Department of Homeland Security to release all unredacted documents from Operation Twin Shield to the public. They argue that transparency, whether exonerating or implicating, is the only path forward. If evidence exists, it should be presented clearly and publicly. If not, the federal government must say so unequivocally to prevent misinformation from festering. Transparency, they argue, would not only settle Omar's case but also restore faith in the integrity of immigration enforcement overall. Public opinion in Minnesota remains divided. Some constituents express embarrassment over the constant headlines that seem to follow their representative, while others view Omar's continued resilience as a sign of strength and authenticity. For better or worse, her name has become synonymous with debates about immigration, media bias, and political integrity. The saga illustrates how the court of public opinion often outweighs the court of law, and how modern politics rewards spectacle more than substance. In the end, Operation Twin Shield continues quietly in the background as federal officials cross-check data, analyze patterns, and build what some describe as one of the most comprehensive anti-fraud databases in agency history. Future phases of the project are expected to expand nationwide, targeting not just marriage-based fraud, but also student and employment visa misuse. Meanwhile, Omar remains a sitting member of Congress, facing no charges, but still at the center of a narrative that refuses to fade. The broader lesson of this story is not merely about Ilhan Omar or immigration enforcement, It is about how truth is processed, filtered, and weaponized in a deeply polarized society. The same rumor that once began as anonymous online chatter has evolved into a cultural flashpoint illustrating the fragility of trust in institutions, the vulnerability of public figures, and the power of repetition to shape perception. Whether the evidence ultimately clears Omar entirely or simply fades without resolution, one fact remains indisputable. The American public deserves clarity, honesty, and verified facts, not political theater. In a time when every scandal becomes a battleground for ideological warfare, the line between rumor and reality has never been thinner, and the search for truth has never been more essential. Until full transparency emerges, the name Ilhan Omar will continue to echo in the national conversation, not only as a lawmaker, but as a symbol of how democracy itself wrestles with truth in the age of viral politics.